Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And this is the Mbongi. And today we have a powerful interview in anticipation of the Happy Africa One Unity Conference that is going to be held in Chicago. We'll have more on that in a bit. We have with us Dr. Josef bin Levi, and we are going to talk about a variety of things. And just to give you just a little bit of the massive or the extensive subject matters in which he covers in his scholarship. And so, of course, we won't be able to get into all of that today. So we're just going to give you a little bit, and hopefully you will continue to research our guest and his work, and hopefully go to Chicago and see him live at the Happy One Unity Conference. So all that and more when we return in just a moment. And we are back, and I know you guys have missed me and been wondering where I have been. I've been here. I'm still in Philly doing my thing, but, I'm into computer science and artificial intelligence. So my studies have me grounded for the moment, and also some other research that I have been doing and preparing. So, for example, I am editing a text. This is not the cover, but it's called Paths to Ma'at, Essays in Honor of Dr. Mubai Bingay Bilolo, an Egyptologist and philosopher out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so there are a number of contributing articles that I'm going to have for this text, and there's a number of Congolese scholars who have also contributed. And what's taken a while is that I'm translating from French and German many of Dr. Mubai Bingay Bilolo's text. And, so that takes a moment, as well as recreating all of the hieroglyphs and all of that good stuff. So by the end of the year, almost finished, just in the editing stages as of now. So by the end of the year, everything should be good. And just a reminder that we have the Happy One Unity or Power in Unity Conference, and it is going to be a variety of speakers. It is a 3-day conference. And if you go to the Happy Film website, you'll be able to get the details in terms of accommodations and the like, but it's going to be a variety of speakers, including Dr. Boyce Watkins, Dr. Juliana Malvo, Dr. George C. Frazier, Dr. Malana Karenga, Queen Afua, Joshua Maponga, Dr. Bayina Bello, Brother Nuri Muhammad, Dr. Obari Cartman, our good brother Robin Walker, all the way out in the UK, Grandmaster Mfudishi, Jehudi Mess out of New York, our guest, Dr. Josef bin Levi, and our good brother Jabari Osazi, Dr. Susan Tata, Crystal Gunn, and it will be hosted by our good brother Dr. Ken Harris. And so this is one of the flyers. Make sure that you go to the website hoppyfilms.com for more details. And so without further ado, I think that's all my announcements for the moment. Without further ado, I want to bring on our guest, but a brief intro for those who are not familiar with Dr. Ben Levy, aka Professor Negus, Rudison Imhotep. He is a prominent scholar and educator and founding member of the Chicago-based Kemetic Institute. He is also a visiting lecturer, and while I was just made aware that he retired from Northeastern Illinois University, teaching courses in philosophy, sociology, African and African American studies. His work centers on the restoration of classical African civilizations and cultural memory. Some notable details include his academic focus, which encompasses ancient and medieval philosophy, classical African civilizations, and biblical literature, as well as philology and linguistics. He's well versed in multiple ancient and classical languages, including Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, and of course the Sesh Meta Neter, therefore the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic script. As well, he is a member of the William Leo Hansberry Society, which is an organization dedicated to the study of African antiquity. So without further ado, I want to bring to the stage our good brother, Joseph Ben Levy. And I keep teetering
And
between
it's
Joseph
Levy too, by
and
the way. Yes, it's
Levy. I'm
Levy.
sorry, Levy. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Levy.
yeah,
Levy.
Ben Levy. And it's Joseph, not Joseph. It could be Joseph, but
Okay.
I stick with Joseph Ben Levy. That's good.
Indeed, indeed. Well, uh, apologize for the mispronunciations. I go back and forth because I always think about Joseph Ben
Dr.
Yakinen
Ben. Yeah, in fact,
when I say the
just to tell you
name.
a short story. Yeah, that short story. When people used to call me Dr. Ben, I used to tell them as long as Dr. Ben Yakinen is alive, he is Dr.
Uh-huh.
Ben. Now I'm good with it now, but as long as he was alive, like, no, 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 no. You talking about Dr. Ben. And they say, oh, you Dr. Ben? No, 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 no. I'm not that Dr. Ben. Shoot, I'm working
Indeed,
on earning it though, that's for sure. But I'm happy to be
indeed.
here, brother. I'm glad to finally, get with you and us talk and stuff like that. It's like we've known each other for a long time, and kind of only communicated almost like virtually, spiritually, and stuff like this. So that to have this upfront and close and personal experience is good.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Yes, I've been familiar with your work for a very long time. And, I've always been interested in like biblical studies. There was a time
Mhm.
where I was a quote unquote Hebrew Israelite.
Mhm.
That's another conversation
Yeah, I
for
bet.
another day.
I bet.
But after I got out of that and found Africa again,
Yeah.
um, that's when I came across a number of the scholars that we all loved dearly in the past, including, saying our good brother, the late Dr. Jacob Carruthers,
Mhm.
uh, and in dealing with the hieroglyphic script and the ancient Egyptian language. And so, but before we veer off, just tell us a little bit about yourself for people who are not familiar with you on this program, since it's your first time here.
Right. Thank you.
And, how did you end up getting into these studies? What sparked that interest at an early age,
All right. Very good.
and ultimately what did you want to achieve by going into this deep dive into ancient history?
Well, that's very good. Well, let me take you back to sophomore year of high school, 1968. I went to a Catholic high school here in Chicago called Hales Franciscan. It was an all male black Catholic high school because for those people who don't know, Chicago is a very segregated city, and I do mean very. And so people who were Catholics, and I wasn't even Catholic, um, those who were black Catholics couldn't go to white Catholic high schools in the city. So the archdiocese built a separate high school called Hales Franciscan, under the auspices of the Franciscan brothers. And I just so happened to not want to go to the high school that was literally right across the street from me, which was Jean Baptiste Point du Sable High School, du Sable High School. And because I didn't want to, I'd gone to school since I was a little guy with all of these people in the hood, and I didn't want to go to high school with them. I wanted to go someplace else, have a different experience. And at that time, I lived in what was then known as a Robert Taylor Homes. It was a part of the largest public housing development in the United States. Of course, it's all torn down now. And so I wanted to go someplace else. And I was fortunate enough to, have enough knowledge to be able to take the test and pass the test to go to Hales Franciscan. Well, one day in religion class, I had, everybody who goes to Catholic school gets a Catholic Bible, which has the Apocrypha in it, which most versions of the KJV and stuff don't have, but the Catholic Bible does have it. And so one day I was reading in the book of Exodus, I'm sure you know this, where it says, and the Pharaoh Pharaoh gave Moses a sign. He said, stick your hand in your bosom and pull it out. And he stuck his hand in his bosom and pulled it out. And it had turned as white as snow. And he said he stuck his hand in his bosom again and pulled it out. And it turned as his other flesh. All right. So I'm like, well, he couldn't have been white at first if he stuck his hand in his bosom and turned out it was white and then stuck it back in and turned to his other flesh, that is the flesh previous to that. Then this couldn't have been a white man. And plus the fact that these people were in Egypt, and Egypt is in Africa, and ancient Egyptians were Africans. That's hands down. So I came, and one day I was in religion class, and I raised my hand and I said, Father, I want to show you something in the Bible, because see, in Catholic school, you don't read the Bible. They give you catechism, but you have a Bible there like as a prop. And so I read that passage to him, and when I read it to him, I said, well, if Moses did this and he stuck his hand in his bosom and pulled it out and it was like white as snow and put it back in and it turned his other flesh, that means his other flesh couldn't have been white either. He had to be like black, And so this white man told me, well, everybody knows that the Jews were white. And I'm like, well, who the hell is everybody? Because that's not what I'm reading here. And so consequently, all the brothers in the class, they wanted to pull their Bibles out from under their chairs, open up and find out where that was to read and stuff. And it's like, oh man, that's something. So anyway, the priest is kind of stumped. And I want you to keep in mind that this is the 1960s. It's hot. Vietnam is hot. The Black Panthers, of course, are huge here. This is the Black Power moment. You know what I mean? A moment that, we greatly miss, and that they, of course, suppressed to give us the civil rights movement. So anyway, I get called to the principal's office after class, and the principal, big fat white man, tells me, Joseph, you have disrupted, I'll never forget his words. He said, you have disrupted the continuity of a Catholic education. I didn't even know what the word continuity was, you understand? But he said, you have two options. You're either going to have to transfer, or we're going to have to expel you from school. So either way, I'm out. Well, at that moment, and I've been doing a lot of studying along the way anyway, and it was at that moment that I was like, I am on to something here. And so after that, I started just digging deep. I want to know more about this thing about Egypt. Of course, I knew that I've ultimately found out that the whole Exodus thing was not even real, didn't really happen, or anything like that. But that's another story. And so I started really, really studying. As I began to study, I began to ask questions of like, how what are the original languages in this thing? How can I find these out? How can I learn them? So I began to start, learning. I started out teaching myself the Hebrew alphabet and how to read and write Hebrew. And then that led to Aramaic. I didn't start getting into Medu Neter basically on my own the hard way, probably until about 1970. And I'm sure you know Dr. Riketti Amen. That's my really, really great friend. We've known each other for like 50 years. And I got to meet her because her sister was a very close friend of my ex-wife at the time. They were like buddies. And one day her sister was by the house and she saw me working with all these little birds and everything. And she was like, oh, my sister does that kind of stuff. I was like, she does? She said, yeah. I said, well, next time you come, why don't you bring your sister over here? And that's how I got to meet Riketti. And I was like, Riketti sat down at our apartment and says, she talks real proper, right? Well, Joseph, would you like to have this conversation in Hebrew, in Arabic, in Chinese, or French? I'm like, well, damn. How about just English for right now? Right? And we got to be really, really close. And I, began to realize how deep she had been going into all these things and the study of language and the study of Medu Neter. And of course, ultimately, she ended up at what was then known as the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago, and studying Medu Neter under people like Klaus Baer, Helene Cantor. These are people who had studied like under Adolf Ehrman, James Henry Breasted. She goes back to that old school of things. And also Coptic under I can't think of his name right now, but Crum, yeah, and of course they were studying Meroitic, and my first introduction to Meroitic language was through Riketti. And relatively, I think about 20 years ago, I gave her back her whole file box full of Meroitic words that she had put together. But once I got into seriously studying Medu Neter, which I didn't really, really learn like formally until I became a graduate student at the Northeastern Illinois University Center for Inner City Studies, which is now known as the Carruthers Center. And I took classes with Dr. Carruthers. That was my first introductions to Medu Neter, and I began to realize that this is more than just some birds and stuff like this is a real language. And ultimately, that was 1976. In 77, I studied Medu Neter with James Allen, when he was just about to complete his doctorate at the Oriental Institute. So I studied with him, and that was back in the day when the only textbook we had on Medu Neter was Alan Gardiner's ancient, Egyptian grammar. That's what everybody in the whole world used, right? And of course, later on, his book on Middle Egyptian stuff has become somewhat of a standard, even though Gardner is still his foundation. As a sidebar, what some people may not know is that Martin Bernal, who wrote Black Athena, Martin Bernal is the grandson of Sir Alan Gardiner. And I didn't know that until I took a class with a guy who was his kind of office mate, Dr. Gary Rensburg, who was a really great Hebrew scholar, telling us about that in the class. But so I began to dive into Medu Neter. I mainly did it because I wanted to know if there was anything in the ancient Egyptian text that said that the children of Israel were in the land of Egypt or Kemet as it was expounded in the book of Exodus. Of course, I later on found out that the book of Exodus has a whole history and how it was composed and when it was produced and all that other kind of stuff. So I did not find anything, even to the extent that we had a huge research trip to Egypt in 1977. And on the 1977 trip, we had a chance to go to Dakar, to the University of Dakar, and meet the great Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop. whom Dr. Carruthers had spent the previous year on his sabbatical studying with. And and of course now that Dr. Job is passed, his the university is now Université Cheikh Anta Diop. He encouraged us to, in fact, he encouraged Dr. Carruthers first and foremost, is that if we really wanted to get into knowing what was happening with ancient Egypt, we had to study the language. We had to get rid of the European filters and study the language for ourselves and bring a kind of an African frame of reference to an African language. And so we did. And I, for one, just went into it like gangbusters. I really did. But then I began to see, not only that we're not looking at a language form independently of anything else. We're talking about a language form, and you know this yourself because you've done work on it, that had tentacles that stretched all across Africa, especially when we talk about, Central Africa, down in the Congo, right? We know that like when Harkuf did his journey and came back with all them animals, most of those animals come out of the Congo, but there was also a branch of the Nile that flowed into the Congo too, which they don't kind of talk about now. But and why I think that the work that you have been doing in terms of Congolese languages has been so crucial, and the work that the scholars in the Congo have done, because see, most people who are looking at Egypt and they see these different, Egyptologists on TV and stuff, like Zahi Hawass and all of them, they don't know that we got a whole army of African Egyptologists who are doing some absolutely amazing work. But you ain't gonna see that on TV. Why? Because they perception that Africans, I don't care whether they're on the here or on the continent, what are we supposed to know? We're not supposed to know much of anything, and their perceptions that we can't know anything. So anyway, that led me into that. Of course, the study in Hebrew led me into looking at Aramaic, because, as I like to explain to people, there's really no such thing as Hebrew. There's no Hebrew language. There's no Hebrew language ever mentioned anywhere in the book that we probably know of as the Tanakh, that the Europeans, that the Christians call the Old Testament or New Testament, and New Testament, mainly the Old Testament. There's no language called Hebrew in there at all. There is, in fact, no people called Hebrews. The word Hebrew, the word Ivrit, right? From the root ever is a verb that means to pass over or cross by. They call Avram HaIvri, Avram, the guy who crossed over. There ain't no people by that name, ain't no nation by that name, but most people, even among so-called Hebrew Israelites, don't even know that, because many of them don't study the language or study it in depth like that. So that's a problematic all by itself, as I found out. And then, of course, I got into studying Aramaic, and even that led me into Sumerian and Akkadian, and seeing all these different connections, that made me realize that how important language is, and this, how important language is in your study. Because you can read a lot of stuff in English all day long, like you were just talking about, the work that you were doing with the Congolese, and to try to say it in Francais, right? To do translations in French, which again, I had to spend me some time to étudier le français, right? To study French, and because there's so much scholarship that is written in French. A lot of Meroitic scholarship is written in French. I got a chance to meet Claude Reilly, who was considered to be the like Meroitic guy out there, and his work and some other stuff that's done that was done in the Sudan, but it's in French. And so I wanted to learn that. I wanted to read that and get insights from it. But also, I had studied Spanish. I was fortunate enough to go to school at the universities of Seville and the University of Madrid in Spain, in España, in 1972, when I was an undergraduate in college, and at the university I attended, Lewis University at the time, and we had a chance to go there, and I had a chance to go there and study there and travel, like all around. I got my Euro pass, man, and I went to Paris. I went to Munich. In fact, that year when I was in Munich, Germany, they had the Olympics there. That was the year that the Black September group killed a lot of the Israeli Olympic team. They went up into their village where they were, and they shot them all up. And I was so happened to have been in Munich downtown back in the day, when you wanted to get a new TV, they used to have them like in the windows, and you could go up to the window and look at whatever was on the TV at that time, especially color TV and stuff like that. And I was in Munich. I was walking downtown, and I saw all these people gathered around the department store. And while I can't speak German, a lot of people feel a lot of people over there, they speak English. And so I went around to see what was happening. They were showing the Israeli team, with the black mask on and stuff, like coming in and out of the rooms where the Israeli team was, where they had been shooting them up. So that was kind of a witness to that kind of history. But I went all around. I went to Barcelona. They call it there. They call it in Spanish in Spain. They call it Barcelona, named after the Barca family. That's Hannibal and his folks, right? And the influence there was great. Valencia and all these places, Malaga, to go to Cordova, you know what I mean? Significant to the Moors, Granada. I had a chance to see all of that. In fact, when I was in Spain, in Spanish, in history class, our teacher told us in Spanish, and I had like studied a lot about it before I went there, so that I could kind of get some insights on it. But he just flat out told us that in Spanish, todos los moros, los negros, that all the Moors are black. And I'm looking at some of the brothers in the class. I said, didn't I tell y'all that? Now here it is. He's saying it right, like no big deal. No big deal. All the Moors were blacks. And the evidence of it is, like everywhere. I went to Alhambra and places like that. So, to look at, I think about, what's my brother's name? I hate when I start having these brain farts at this age. Who went all around the world and did all the Black presence stuff.
Renoka Rashidi.
Renoka Rashidi, yes, Renoka Rashidi. I kind of, came back, and he hadn't been doing a lot of that, but I had a chance to see a lot of that, all of the major cathedrals and stuff like that, where they had the Black images on the Madonna and Child, and all that kind of stuff. So, but all those things were very important to me doing what I am doing now and continue to do. And that is to do deep dives into not only just Nile Valley civilizations, but to places where we have African civilizations, in general, and I don't profess to be an expert in all of those kinds of things, but what I know, I know. What I don't know, I don't know, and I'm happy to, to chop it up with brothers like yourself who are out there doing their work and gaining knowledge from you, because I'm a firm believer that, should never let a day go by when you don't increase yourself in knowledge, and there's so much to learn. And, I've been blessed to have, I'll be 74 on my birthday this year, and to be able to say that since I was like 16, I mean, when I say 16, I mean, that was when I can point to the year that I was the age when I got real serious. Because back then, when I was 16 during the Black Power movement, everything was about Black people. Everything was about being Black and proud and what it meant to be Black. And you standing on Black, I was part of the whole movement here in the city of Chicago to push for Black studies, even in high school. And now we have a state law where it is mandatory here in the state of Illinois that a course in Black studies must be taught at all levels of high school, elementary and high school. And there's a state law that courses in Black studies must be taught at state universities. So we're not going to have that problem that some of these other folks have about, like trying to get rid of Black studies, African studies, or something like that. In the state of Illinois, we're not going to have that problem because we don't. And that's because people fought for it to make it happen. Illinois Transatlantic Slave Trade Commission, which I did research on, all that stuff that's in place. But sometimes we got to be proactive rather than reactive. You know what I mean? We got to make things happen for ourselves. So yeah, that's a kind of I guess a brief journey.
Indeed. Now, so for our audience, Hoppy is the brother sister organization and podcast to the Mbongi. And I've been involved with them for a number of years now. And y'all may recall back in 2022 that the first Power and Unity conference was the result of the original One Africa conference that was scheduled in Egypt, actually in Aswan, that year for, and a few of the same guests that's going to be in Chicago was scheduled to be there. Brother Jabari, I don't know, yeah, Dr. Solange Ashby, Infudishi, Brother Anthony Browder, Dr. Theophilo Benga, Mama Jeffries and Baba Jeffries, Professor James Small, and a few others, including myself. And once they heard that all of these scholars were coming to Aswan, the whole of Egypt went crazy,
Yeah.
and did an entire campaign to get us barred from Egypt. And it
Yes,
got
sir.
to the point where a few of the scholars had apparently received some threats and the
Yes.
like. So, and the government and things canceled the conference,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to and this was a week before everybody was supposed to go
Right.
to Egypt, you know. And so it was the result of that and us rescheduling the trip and things that the Power of Unity conference, initially happened. We ended up doing the conference anyway, but in Detroit. And so some scholars were switched out because of scheduling and stuff of that nature, but we still had the trip just in April of that year. So this was in February that the original conference was supposed to have happen. So so in continuing in that legacy, they're doing a second conference some years later. Is going to be in Chicago, as I mentioned previously, with the scholars that I mentioned, including, of course, our guest, and the link will be in the description. And so a number of powerful speakers will be there and different presentations. So I wanted to ask you if you could just give us a summary of your specific talk. What are you going to be talking about when the people get there? And we'll go from there.
Okay. Without going into a lot of detail about my talk will involve language. It will involve text, and I'm going to be looking at three different texts. And I had a tough time deciding which one of these presentations I was going to make, but I decided on this one. It's three different texts. I'm going to be looking at the one that is called the we probably call it the excellent follower, but they call it the tale of the shipwrecked sailor. That's what the Egyptologists call it, but it's probably called the excellent follower. I'm going to be looking at a particular line from the one known as A Man and His Ba, the conversation the dialogue between a man and his Ba. And then in the third one, I'm going to be looking at the text that is commonly known as the Gospel of Thomas, where it's not even called a gospel. But I'm going to look at the Coptic of a couple of lines. And in that, I want to show the significance of the nature of the female as deity that is laid out in the text. But you can only see it if you read Coptic. And so, and that's kind of what I'm gonna be covering. And I think one, because it kind of shows, my growth as a scholar, but also to give us some insights into how much more it is we got to know, how much more we have to learn, and how important it is for us not to have to rely on what them Europeans are always saying. We got to understand that uh, they don't have a monopoly on knowledge, and oftentimes, and I mean oftentimes, they can't even agree on what a damn text even means. And that's why we have a right to come in and provide our own analysis and our own interpretations for our people. Because, see, when they're doing their interpretations, they're doing this kind of universalist thing as if, what we say, that's what everybody ought to go with, what everybody ought to say. However, when we begin to study the language for ourselves and look at it from an African-centered perspective, you begin to see that the language talks back to you. It talks back to you in a certain kind of way, because for the Europeans, it's all about art. It's the old Winckelmann thing, it's so-called father of art history, and they see it all as art. It's aesthetic. They don't see this is a language. While they see these symbols, a symbol is always something that stands for something else. Always something that stands for something else. And these things that we see that are called, hieroglyphs, as we call them, Medu Neter, are images of stuff that existed around them every day in their life. If you go there now and you walk around and you know what you're looking for, you see them birds and, branches and stuff like that. They're all around you every day. And so the language is a language that not only talks back to you, but allows you to talk to it. And so, so I'm gonna try to share some of that insight that I have from that point. Let me share something with you too about what you said about the trip, and I want to give you a little history, take you back, because them Arabs over there in Egypt, in the Arab Republic of Egypt, as they call it, have had some real issues with us, because we've been having groups of black people going over there, and for a long time. And what caught them was, the large group that we took over in 1977. We had almost, I don't know, 200-300 people. And then in 1986, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, ASCAC, had their international conference in Aswan and brought 1,000 black people from this country to the Nile Valley. And that really kind of like threw them for a loop. Because they're all out there arguing about us so-called Afrocentrics and all this kind of stuff they don't even know what they're talking about and things like that. But also, we're providing a certain level of consciousness to the black folks who live in places like Aswan. You've been there, seeing them black folks down there look like us, happy to see us. They loving on us, and we loving on them, and we looking after them. We doing things for them. We, when we're in the souk, right? The market, and we buying things, when we go out to eat, we tipping them tough. We tipping them real tough. We had an incident in one of the hotels in Cairo where the Egyptian supervisor, whatever, the Nubians was there. He wanted to take all their money and decide how he was going to distribute it. And we had to just like come Chicago on him and like, look, you're not going to touch these people. This is our money. We giving this money to them because we know you're not going to give them the money and this and that. And look, you should have seen the smiles on them brothers' faces, because we stood up for them in a way that it was like, now say something wrong to them and see what happened. We had another kind of incident too that I want to kind of get into, because when we met Dr. Shekanta Job, he told us when we got to Egypt that we make sure that we go into the tomb of Ramses III. They have just recently opened it up. I'm curious to see whether they kept it, with the images, the 4 different images that are 4 a piece around, with the ancient Egyptians as, the Kemites as black dressed the same, and the Nehesi, the Cushites, Nubians, black dressed the same, to show that, they're one of the same people. And he told us that was
still
important.
there, but now they have a glass, because they got like glass at the bottom, like all around on the edge. So you gotta, it's still there, but it's kind of hard to see. And if you try to take photos, especially with a flash, that
It
glass will
kind
reflect the
of,
light back, so you don't, but it's still there. I've been there a
okay,
couple
good.
times.
That's that. They will do clever stuff like that, and so they. They had the tomb was closed at that time, and we had a little incident uh, over there on with some of the Egyptian folks who was trying to like push up on some of the sisters and stuff like that. They didn't like it, and they told us about it, and we had to like come kind of Chicago gangster on them, and the mayor was so embarrassed because this was going to be an international scene. We were going to make an international incident out of it. He asked us, "What can I do to make this right? What can I do to make this right?" He said, "Let us into that tomb over there, Ramesses III. That's what we want." And he went and got somebody. We got on the boats, crossed the Nile. The guy was waiting there at the gate, opened the gate. We went in, took all kind of pictures. It was pretty ugly in there at the time. But we were able to do that. And then we had some t-shirts made. I have one. I can't wear it anymore now called Let the Ancestors Speak. And so, when we go there, and this is the problem here, not only that, you know, Dr. Solange Ashby is my good sister, in Hansberry Society. She's internationally known, in terms of what she could do. And after this incident that happened, they threatened her. They even had a newscast where they castigated her in Egypt. Fortunately, one of our other members, Dr. Dima Mahmoud, she's works for National Geographic. She had a chance to show it to us, and she translated what they were saying about Solange. I mean, like what? But of course, we know that there's some whole history there with them trying to deny, deflect, and whatever. We unfortunately got some Negroes go over there too who think, well, no, them people, they're the real Egyptians. Y'all wrong, because there's some crap that they tell them because they haven't done any work or done any study. But it doesn't matter because we know, and they know that we know. And it's getting harder and harder now for them to hide that reality. So what they do is they engage in philosophy, there's a term in Latin. It's called argumentum ad silencio. Argumentum ad silencio, which means the argument from silence. In other words, if we don't tell you, you don't know. And so we are so into assuming that those folks know that they could talk to us about a whole lot of things and tell us nothing at all. And this is why having our own scholars is so important. This has been so going back to the 19th century. We've been having scholars talking about, the Africanness of ancient Egypt, Anthony Furman, Edward Wilmot Blyden, who else we got? Martin Delaney. I mean, we can go on and on. Pauline Elizabeth Hopkins, Maria Stewart. We got a lot of people. Of course, in the early 19th century, you got Drusilla Dungy Houston, as I found out her name is properly pronounced. We got a lot of people, black men and women, who were talking about this. And part of the reason why they were talking about this in the 19th century is we had to understand what education was like then. If you got a chance to engage in some form of higher education, you had to learn Greek and what they used to call Chaldaic, what they think of as Hebrew today. So you had to have those skills. And not only that, you read the classics in Greek all the time. So you got a chance to learn all of these concepts and ideas that were expressed in Greek that otherwise, you wouldn't see. So they knew right away what melanchros meant, like, and stuff like that. They understood what Aeschylus was talking about, or Ammianus Marcellinus, or Herodotus. They could, because they were reading it in the original in Greek, and so they were understanding that. And this was almost like sacred knowledge. I mean, you have people like William Scarborough, right, who wrote one of the earliest primers on Greek in the United States, period. And right now, William Scarborough the MLA, the Modern Language Association, has an award that they give out in his name. But I wonder how many of them people know that man was a black man. He was at Wilberforce, you know. So they're you know, the whole thing of what they do and what they, in terms of trying to deflect and stuff like that. See, that's wearing down, because we got to remember in 1974 when they had the Cairo conference and the UNESCO conference on the peopling of ancient Egypt and deciphering of the Meroitic script, that Doctors Obenga and Dr. Diop were involved in. See, that whole question of whether or not ancient Egypt was an African civilization, whether or not the ancient Egyptian language was an African civilization, the African language, was settled. But the majority of the public didn't know. See, they didn't put it out there for them. Only those of us who were like in academia or keeping up with that, or followers of Doctors Diop and Obenga, you know, were into that. And now what's interesting, and I think you probably see this, is that after Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop passed away, then they wanted to attack him. But if you notice, they don't touch Dr. Obenga. They don't even come near him. They already know that, you know, that's like going into a gunfight with a knife. You're not going to win. All right. So they don't mess with him, but they don't talk about him either. Again, the argument from silence. They don't talk about him. Even the same thing is true of the other African scholars that are out there who are doing this kind of work. And that's not, you know, not to mention those of us who are doing that kind of work. Now, and that brings me back to, you know, what's happening with Hapi in this group. Early on in the going back to 1984, actually, when I first met Dr. Karenga at the first Ancient Egyptian Studies conference we had in Los Angeles, California in February. That's when I got to meet a lot of the folks, you know, like Dr. James Smalls afterwards. And I went out there I was scheduled to speak on the panel. Now, I'm a young dude then. Now, I mean, I'm maybe 28, maybe. And my presentation got accepted on the first and second intermediate periods in Kemetic history, which, you know, there's a whole lot in that I would, you know, change right now, but that's where my knowledge was at that time. And when I came out to California, because I didn't go out there with everybody else, I came on my own. And it was my first time ever being in LA. And the next day when I come to the community college where we were having a conference, I saw the schedule and who I was going to be on the panel with. Man, let me tell you, I was ready to run and go back home. See, so I'm looking at the schedule. I'm on there. You got LeGrand Clay, you got Dr. Lynn Jeffries, you got Dr. John Henry Clark, of course, Dr. Anderson Thompson, and me. I think Dr. John Jackson was on there too, and me. And look here, I went out, the true story. I went to Dr. Carruthers and I said, Dr. Carruthers, I can't do this. He said, what do you mean? What you mean, Ben Levy, you can't do this? I said, look, do you see who I'm on the panel with? I mean, I understand these are people, you know, I admire them. I'm reading their works, all right? Studying their works, you know, and stuff like that. And here I get the chance to sit and be on a panel with them. And I'm like, I'm a baby, essentially. And I told him, I don't know if I can do this. And he told me something that gave me a lot of confidence. He told me, Ben Levy, the reason why you're on that panel is because those men wanted to hear what you had to say because they don't know anything about that. So they want to hear you. And I know that you can get up there. I know what you can do. And I know you're capable of doing it. So I want you to go get on up there and represent well, right? And so I did, even though I was nervous the whole time, my whole 20 minutes, you know, I was like flat out nervous, but I made it through. And afterwards, you know, it was well received. And afterwards, I can't remember who came up to me, but some folks from New York came up to me, you know, with the First World Alliance, and they invited me to come to New York to present. And so I did. And I stayed with the elder sister Kefa and her husband Bill Jones. I used to always stay with them. That was all hilarious all by themselves. I was like their little son, you know. And
Mhm.
but but also I got a chance to uh, meet, person, got real close in person with Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and James Smalls. In fact, I just talked to him last week, and we haven't seen each other for like 35 years because I thought, he was going to be here with the Happy Shot, and he told me he's going, he's got a group going to Ghana. And so, and I didn't know that he was that much older than me. I always thought we were around the same age back then. But after I would lecture all the time, they would take me to Sylvia's, the old Sylvia's. We'd always go to Sylvia's
Oh
and
yeah.
have dinner and talk. And it was really, really kind of a special thing to me. And I never forget that Dr. Clark would always refer to me as Dr. Ben Levy. Dr. Ben Levy, brother, Dr. Ben Levy there. And I was like, I said, Dr. Clark, I'm really not a doctor. Let me tell you what he said to me, which I think is very significant.
Hmm.
He said, look here, a whole lot of black folks out here got PhDs and call themselves doctors, and they don't know a damn thing. And if we decide who's doctor in our community and who's not, and if we say you're a doctor. I was silent after that. So yeah, and this is when I got a chance to meet everybody up in New York. And then I was frequently coming to New York, to Harlem, to a lecture with the First World Alliance, which was really a cool thing. And I would before I left, I would always go to Dr. Clark's brownstone, his home, and sit and talk with him and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And he'd always share just so much knowledge with me. They kind of well, everybody don't know this, but let me tell this to you, kind of thing. And he would give me different types of information. Man, that was beautiful. And then on top of that, right quick, I asked him, well, where are your books? Because we down in the basement. He said, oh, they all
Yeah.
upstairs. So I said, can I take a look? He said, yeah, brother, go on up there. Man, 3 whole floors, nothing but books. And I mean, this is stuff like, oh, you got this. I mean, I read about that and this and that and the other. And so when I came down, I never forget the first time I said, Dr. Clark, we gonna all have to leave this mortal coil one day, and heaven forbid that happen to you. But I'll take real good care of your books. If you let me, I will take real good care of your books. He said, no, brother, I already got that done. I think they were going to Emory University or someplace like that. But yeah, that was that's kind of a thing, and how I got hooked up with the Happy folks and Takia, that I met. I haven't seen him since since 2002 or 2004, something like that, when he was here. Yeah.
Wow. That's That's crazy. Like I've seen, I don't know if you've been to Professor Smalls. Well, you said you hadn't seen him in 35 years. I
Yeah,
talked to him
yeah.
last week as well, and he, I told him that I'll be interviewing you,
Mhm.
and he was like, tell him I said hello. I haven't seen him in that many years,
Right.
but like his library, like when I went to his home, this was like back in like 2005,
Uh-huh.
2006. In New York, and it was just massive. And I'm like, man, I aspire to get to that level where like my library looks like a city library,
Right.
like
Right. Well,
with the
let me give
books
you
and
a minute here.
read.
Let me pan around for a second. Let you see the books that fell down from my shelves here.
Oh
See if
yeah,
I
no
can
problem. Indeed, yep.
see if we can pan around to the other side here.
Yep.
Crazy. Right. It's crazy. So the terrible thing tomorrow, I got the engineer coming up. He's already put some more, you know, brackets in uh for the shelves and stuff like that, so I can put them up. And then the crazy part is go now put all this stuff back. But I'm gonna do something different. I got to order that. I'm gonna put things in now before I put them up there. And if somebody wanted some, I just know I put that over there. I mean, I can pull it right out of right there. But this time I'm gonna put this in order. And that's just what we got in here. This is not counting what is out in the hall out there, out in the living room. I got about 8, 9 bookshelves out there. I got 7 in the dining room. And in like the third bedroom, which is like a storage room, I got 3 bookcases in there because my wife, she's like um, a bibliophile for real. When I first met her, the first time I met her and I came to a place, I was like, damn, you got books? She looked at me like I was crazy. I got books. But as a brother,
Yeah.
like, I don't, date people and they got books. But yeah, she got books and she's serious. And she has a lot of stuff I don't have. Like Black Hollywood. My wife is ex-military, got everything on the blacks in the military you could think of, and black female writers going into the 19th century and stuff like that she's got. And so we do good. In fact, at the Juneteenth celebration they had at the DuSable Museum um, on Friday. One of the young brothers who's a news reporter for the local ABC station, I saw him. His name is Shaquille Brewster, and I said, "Oh, brother, how you doing?" He's with 2 white men, right? How you doing? And though he said, "Hey, could I ask y'all some questions? Some questions about Juneteenth?" I didn't think. In fact, I know that when he put that mic in my face, that he was not ready in any kind of way whatsoever for the answers he was about to get. Not at all. And so, I went all in on him, on the history of Juneteenth, but also, about, I'm talking about Martin Delaney. I'm talking about, Marcus Mosiah Garvey and, the Universal Legal Improvement Association, the African Communities League. And, and I'm talking about the different people that involved in that, how important the history is. I break down to him about, most of these people don't even know what woke is. You know what I mean? And you ask them, they can't even tell you this, that, and how, I'm like, why would people want to be asleep? What sense do that make? You know, don't nothing
A
but to sleep.
quick
Huh?
no, I was about to say a quick bit of synchronicity. We celebrate Juneteenth because the letter came to Galveston, Texas,
Right.
and I'm from Texas and Houston
Okay.
to be exact,
All right.
and so that's exactly where Dr. Jacob Carruthers is from.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
to see that the emancipation and what that did, what that produced, even though
Right.
he moved up a little bit north to
Yeah.
Chicago.
Exactly.
But I'm sorry, continue.
No. And so, and then he asked my wife, "What do you think?" And she usually don't get the mic put in her face. And I was like, "Oh boy," I'm looking at like, "What y'all do that for?" And she just went in all in on. But guess what? They didn't broadcast it. And I told her, "Don't be surprised if they don't put that on." Because them white men who were with him, they looking at us and we spitting fire. See, because usually they just come up to some black folks, "Hey, what do you think?" And they're like, "Oh, this is great. Love the people, the beautiful weather, da 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 da." But no, we spend some serious history at them. And so, and probably, Shaquille Brewster might have wanted to air it, but they were like, because they were the producers, they were like, "Nah, we can't put that out there. Can't do that." So, but that's how that goes, though. We understand that that's the game. They want to they want black people to have happy stories. You know what I mean? And I don't mean happy like the Nile River term happy like we talk about here. I mean, the HAPPY stories. They want to like the prophet Jeremiah said, get them smooth things, teach them delusions. That's what they prefer to give us instead of some serious truth. And so yeah, man, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody when they come to Chicago. I mean, because there are a lot of people I know them, but I've never met them, and they might know me and never met me. So this will be a kind of a good thing for us to all get together and for them to kind of really, check out Chicago and what it was and what kind of what goes on here and what it's like here. It's unfortunate that we couldn't have more time, and we could like let me take you around and show you what Chicago really look like. Because y'all on the south side. See, we got the south side, we got the west side, and we got the north side. There's a southeast side where most of the Mexicans live, but black people live on the south side. The University of Chicago is dead in the heart of the black community. In fact, I would say that second to the Philadelphia Negro, done by W.B. Du Bois, which was the first true sociological study ever produced in the United States. The University of Chicago's work done by Horace Caton and Sinclair Drake called Black Metropolis certainly fits second, because if you're going to do any type of so-called urban study in sociology, you must read and study Du Bois, the Philadelphia Negro, and Horace Caton and Sinclair Drake's Black Metropolis. Those are mandatory, because the work that Horace Caton and Sinclair Drake did out of the School of Social Science at the University of Chicago is a study of the Black South Side, and part of what they call the Black Belt that they call Bronzeville now, which is now being very gentrified. People, white folks come out, I live in Bronzeville now. Yeah, no kidding. So, which was the place where people stopped off in Illinois Central train when they just dropped off here in Chicago, and they stopped right there at King Drive, what used to be called Grand Boulevard before it was called South Park, and then King Drive. They called it Grand Boulevard because all of the huge graystone mansions that line up and down that street, from about 26th Street all the way to 51st Street, and then you got Washington Park and all that. But it's very, very interesting. I mean, very, very interesting. And of course, everything around the University of Chicago is changing dramatically. And then with the opening of the Obama Center, things even more changing. I mean, like that place is. We were there Friday or Juneteenth, and we were there, and it is like 19 acres of amazing. And we didn't even go inside the buildings because the tickets are sold out through December. But just to walk around the campus and to see the work that they have done to the place, and they got a separate auditorium, separate like gymnasium. It's a full like full size court up in there, and a few other things they got going on that I know of, and so it's going to be a pretty active place for time to come, and it sits. In fact, we have a museum, the Museum of Science and Industry. The Museum of Science and Industry, the MSI. Its building has been in existence since the World's Columbian Exposition that took place here in, I think, 1893 or something like that. That's how long the museum building is there. The museum shut down for the whole day because of the opening of the Obama Library, and they have never, ever in life shut down, ever. But they shut down for that. And it was a very nice thing, I mean, the energy and stuff that the people had, just being there and congregating and stuff, and coming from all over to just be there and experience it was something special, you know what I mean? That is going to have a lasting effect on the city for a very, very long time, and that's good, and it's a good thing. And so, the fact that Hapi is coming here for the conference, they're going to be staying at the study. Now, I'm going to tell you something about the study. It's a hotel on the University of Chicago's campus at the Midway Plaisance, big kind of huge parkway. And as much as I've lived here all my life, and I'm over at the University of Chicago like all the time. I never even knew they had a hotel right there. But just so happened that I had to use the washroom, and that was the first door I saw to go up in. And I went up in, and I'm like, what is this place? And it's a hotel. It's nice too. Them brothers pick. Look here, that place is nice. Considering all things. I was wondering where folks gonna stay when they come in. I'm thinking like, why downtown? So, but that place right there is ideal. It's centrally located. It's walking distance from the Obama Center. It's walking distance from the ISAC, the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, which was used to be the Oriental Institute. It's walking distance from that. I mean, when I'm saying walking, I'm talking about 3 or 4 blocks, and we don't have New York blocks in Chicago. All right. It ain't like you walk 3 blocks in New York, you know what I mean? You walked a mile. No, it's not like that in Chicago, and the DuSable Museum is also very much in walking distance, from where they are, very centrally located. The only difference is Malcolm X College, which is all the way over on the west side, but it's also the new Malcolm X College, and it's very nice, very nice. So, this they made a good move there. It should be, really nice.
Well, again, the conference is going to be a 3-day conference. Is going to be from Friday, July the 24th, to Sunday, July the 26th. And it's a number of activities that is going on. And you can visit the Hoppy, let me get my banner up, hoppy.com or hoppyfilm.com link. And, you can get your tickets there, and the event will be live streamed. So for those of us who can't make it, and matter of fact, just in a few more days after the last day is my birthday. So I will be 47 years of age. So I'm starting my old man journey, as they say. So, maybe I could come to Chicago if I can't make it there to celebrate my birthday. I've been to Chicago technically, but only in the airport. So I've never left the airport of
You got
Chicago.
O'Hara Airport? Where you at, O'Hara? The big
I
airport?
assume
You at
so.
Midway. So we have 2 airports. Yeah, we have 2 airports. We have Midway Airport, which is on the south side.
Okay.
And O'Hara Airport, which is the big one. If you're going to travel international, people go there. But if you live on the south side, most people try to go to Midway because they have very few delays. You in and out is right here in the city. So if you ever think about it, always think about flying in on Midway. To Midway Airport. Midway is the hub for Southwest Airlines. And O'Hara is the hub for United Airlines. Yeah, so that's the distinction.
Well, we are going to be wrapping up soon, so I just got one question before we go, and that is, given your recent retirement, I know that's when a lot of people start really kind of diving into the work that they want to do, and so are you researching anything specifically with the intent to publish it? And if so, what research are you doing right now? Is it what works are you involved in at the moment?
Well, I got 8 books that are ready for publication. My dissertation is 400 pages. It's 3 separate books by itself. But my problem is I haven't been able to, I don't know how to negotiate that whole publishing thing and what it's all about. I went to one group of people, and I didn't particularly care for how they were approaching things. I want to get a name because they're very famous, and how approach things. So I really don't know anything about how to get my stuff out to people. I'm looking at one thing I got right here. It's called The Arabs with Special Focus on the Palestinians. Where I wrote this in 1982.
Wow.
This is what it looks like right here. And I got stuff like this that I've done that's just been, and they would essentially be like kind of small monographs and stuff, but a lot of information. And just to read this from 1982, you think that when you see that nothing changed. And not only do I cover some stuff about the whole conflict, I talk about who they are for real. See, a lot of these Arabic speaking peoples, as I probably call, because I studied Arabic too, right? And these Arabic, I studied a lot about them and their culture and stuff like that. Will often, they may speak Arabic, but they're not Arabs. you know, because there ain't a lot of Arabs, and you got a lot of black folks, even on the continent, as you well know, who want to be Arabs. You know, these pseudo Arabs who are claiming Arab history because they have accepted Shahada, you know, Shahada, and converted to Islam, and have bought into this concept in Arabic that's called Jahaliya. Jahaliya means ignorance. And Jahaliya is the age of ignorance. That is the time before the Prophet Muhammad, as they like to say, Salamu Alaikum, came into existence. Once he came in, they started doing their thing. Anything that exists before that time is no history. And this is why you find a lot of Muslims, even on the continent, who they don't recognize the period before Islam shows up. And this is very, very problematic because that's like erasing your history under the auspices of Arabization and Islamization, and that's problematic. But
You can see them, like I've witnessed them in Egypt
mhm.
carving out and chipping away
Yeah,
the hieroglyphs
yes, sir.
on columns and temples and stuff
Yes,
like
sir.
this. Like if this was your history, you know, people would appreciate their own
Yes, sir.
culture and history to preserve something like that. But
Yeah,
they just tearing off hieroglyphs like this was
yeah.
just some kindergartners their child's scribble or something to that nature. But I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
but
go
that's
ahead.
because they've been conditioned. See, that's the danger of Islamization and Arabization, but also Christianity too. You know, and also among many other brothers who are called the so-called Hebrew Israelites and stuff like that, or Israelites, however what they want to define themselves. I always refer to as Bnei Israel. You see, because you never read where it says, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the Jews, speak unto the Jewish people, or speak unto the Hebrew Israelites." You know, in the Hebrew it says Bnei Israel, you know, the children of Israel, or the sons and daughters of Israel. And nobody really addresses it like that. And I found that out because a lot of, you know, you know, I got a lot of respect for brothers who do that because, you know, I come from the old school, and I've seen a lot of the different flavors of that thing. You know what I mean? And I've written about it. All right. And have talked about it. And I've had some discussion with the brothers, like the brothers I call the Purple Gang, you know, out there, the one way they call themselves. They're a lot of young brothers. They're very, very zealous. I respect it. I used to be like that when I was young too, because I was stuck in the box and I couldn't see until I was able to look outside the box. And when I looked outside the box and I stepped outside the box and looked into the box, I was like, man, there's a whole lot missing up in here. You know, you can't engage in intellectual warfare with some of them rabbis and stuff like that talking that nonsense, you know, and so they want to get up there and scream in their faces and stuff like that. That ain't phasing him. Like an old rabbi told me once years ago, I was in my teens. He told me, he said, "We know we are not the real people, but we own the guns, we own the land. What can you do?" And you know what? That shut me up because I was like, damn, nothing. So you gotta, you know, kind of push past that and even understand. I mean, the history there's history there, but you got to really understand it, and it's not confined to that book that they call the Tanakh or the Bible, as some of them young brothers once told me. The King James version of the Bible is the authoritative version, and I'm like, okay, see, y'all can't even talk to me now. Can't talk to me now because you don't even know the history of that thing you got in your hand. As one brother told me, you know, I was asking something in Hebrew, and he said to me, "Well, you know, there's no such thing as that language because you see, when the Lord returns, when the Messiah returns, He gonna return to us a pure language." And I asked him, "Well, how you gonna know what a pure language is if you don't even know what they got out here right now? What sense does that make?" But I understand. You know, I understand that, you know, they're young, they're zealous, you know. A lot of brothers don't read, they don't definitely research. And in some places, they don't encourage them to research or ask questions. You always they remind me sometime of what happens when in the church on Wednesday, you know what I mean, when they have a Bible study. You know, you go to Bible study, but you can't ask no questions. That's forbidden in Bible study. You don't ask no questions. You know, and I know this because I got invited to a church once here in Chicago. Man heard me, you know, talk on some biblical history, and he invited me to his church to speak. And so I asked him, "Well, what would you like me to speak on?" He told me, come in your own way, brother. I'm like, okay. So I did a whole lecture on the book of Revelation, Revelation 14, the book of Daniel, and show how the book of Revelation was never in the original versions. They decided to put together what they call in Greek the Pleidia Theke, or what we translate as New Testament, and the issues with the book of Daniel and stuff like that, and the four beasts come up out of the sea and stuff like that, and explain to him that this is really, kind of a gematria. This is history hidden behind, symbols and numbers and stuff like that. And when I started breaking it all down, the man and people, and I'm telling people go to this particular verse or chapter, and they opening their books, they go in there. That minister got up and stopped me in the middle of my whole lecture where I was like on fire. And he said, "You can't talk like that in my church." I said, "But you invited me." He said, "No, you can't talk like that." I was like, wow. He said, I'm gonna have to end this right here, right now. And I heard some of the people murmuring out there in the audience, because this was a big church, mega church. They kind of murmuring out there in the audience. Look here, brother, that man didn't even give me my honorarium. I didn't even get no dinner from the ladies down there cooking. They burning down there in the basement. I didn't even get a dinner. Yep. But then, as I started out in this whole lecture kind of coming full circle, how, I had that confrontation with that Catholic priest when I was in high school. And I realized then I was on to something. Well, there goes full circle. And here's among people who've been colonized into a system of belief that is designed to ensure that you are not rebellious in any way, mentally, physically, or otherwise. And heaven forbid, some of our brothers who out there, who made the move and gone into practicing some form of Yoruba candomblé and Santeria, you see what I'm saying? And start making moves like that. And then people said, "Oh, you're practicing witchcraft." I asked them, "Where's that? Where's that?" Y'all walk around here with a symbol of punishment and death around your neck. That ain't even the way the real thing even looked. All right, that they talking about in that, because in the Greek they use the word stauros, which means a tree. They don't use krus, a cross. That's something that's that was invented later on. And then y'all practicing idolatry and stuff like that with a dead man hanging on your neck. You don't even know what he looked like. All types of issues and stuff that I could go on and on and on and on about, besides the composition of the text, when were they put together, why were they put together. As I told some people one time when I taught my class in comparative religions, which was one of my favorite classes I taught, that they noticed that the so-called synoptics, which mean they seem alike, but they're not, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, not quite John, did not have any author's name on them. Those were added later. And it happened in a lot of other cases like that. And then there are the multitudes of texts, of course, in the case of when I'm talking about the Gospels, there are over 500,000. Let me say that again. 500,000 versions of those texts. And we don't have an original of any of them. What we have are copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies. And that we got to remember that people weren't walking around with no Bible under their arm in the ancient times, And when they were confused, they punched the easy button, and the answers came out. They failed to realize that you had a population of people at the time where at least 85% of the people were illiterate. You had maybe another 5% who could do no more than sign their name in documents, people, like we get all these, like the book of the coming forth by day, that was an industry where if you could afford it, there were scribes who all they knew how to do was write enough Medu Neter to write your name in the blanks, and then you had another maybe 5% who actually could do scribal work, actually do writing, but most people couldn't read or write, and they didn't have to, because it wasn't a formal thing like that, people did things because this is what they did. It was culture. They didn't have to remind themselves that on a particular day and time, we had to do this thing, because they were following the moon, the sun, and all that kind of stuff, and the cycles of nature. They're not worried about some of the stuff that's got us caught up in things and the way we do things. So, but like I said, all those are portions of things that are separate lectures all by themselves. That some people,
And
yeah, but you know this though, brother. Right. You know this already.
Yeah, it's good to have others who people respect reinforce certain arguments,
Yes, sir.
on the channel, so nobody just think it's just me, and of course sometimes everybody isn't going to read the works, so they don't know where the citations come from, and
Hmm.
stuff like this. They just may be opposed to the argument,
Hmm.
and but it and also we just have this wave of ignorance and misinformation that's coming
Yes, sir.
on the um on social media. So
Yeah,
I like to have these conversations to have that counter. So for people who are serious about the scholarship, who can actually read the scripts and go into and think deeply and think critically, saying about the question. So like, even like, for example, like you said that we don't have an original script. Well, the question would be, how can we authenticate that something was an original in the first place?
that's right.
Like the ordinary person doesn't think about that. It's different like when we have something in stone, right? that
Right,
that that is there, but like pieces of copies of paper, that's a little bit different.
right,
But
right.
I
Exactly.
would love to have you, back on the program to, and I know this is just kind of introduction, we just kind of free flowing, um so that people can get a feel for your knowledge base and what you research. But
Sure. In
hopefully
answer to
we
your
can have
question,
you. Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry, go
no,
ahead.
but I'm sorry. I'm sorry. In answer to your question, man, I'm working on so many different things at one time. I wasn't one of those people who like now I'm retired now start working on this. I've been working on it
Yeah,
all
for
along,
years, yeah.
and but I also do want to, I would like to get some of my stuff that I've had for like decades put out there right now, unadjusted, just the way it is,
Uh-huh.
and getting feedback. But like I said, man, I don't know much about that whole publishing thing, how it works, and all that. I don't know any of that. You know.
We'll definitely have to talk, because there's
Okay.
some
Like I said, I know you
options.
know some things about that, and
Yeah.
maybe you can help me out. Yeah, but I don't know. But that's what I do. I've done a lot of I'm always working in those particular areas. I'm always working in looking at the stuff. Always in when it comes to the ancient things, to try to read as much of the in the original I can. And then I'm always trying to, like I said, I went into Études le Français so that I could lire l'érudition uh, en français, right? I want to start studying French so I can learn to read the scholarship in French. You know,
That was
um,
my reason for learning French, because I
exactly.
couldn't read Diop's. And
Right.
speaking of Diop, I'm wearing a Diop conference shirt right
Oh,
now, so
wow,
let's
that's
check out
nice.
Diop.
Right. Well, while you're doing it,
Uh,
let me show you this book he autographed for me that has never been
oh,
published in English.
oh, wow.
Yeah, this is my prized possession right here, brother. Parenté
Uh,
génétique de l'Égyptien pharaonique et de l'Onde négro africain.
Genetic
Yeah,
relationship of Pharaonic Egypt and Black African
right,
languages.
right, exactly. And got that beautiful shake out the Diop autograph right there on it. Yeah.
Wow.
This is my. I mean, this is my, and it's never been published in English. You know, and so this is like one of my especially prized possessions from him. That
I think been an issue with the publishing, because Dr. Raketti Alman has a translation. She
Yeah, I
translated
know.
the text,
Yeah,
and
I have,
they
in
won't
fact,
let
I
her
have a
publish
copy.
it.
Yeah, I have a copy of her Civilization Barbarie that she translated
Yeah,
from French into English. That
yeah.
one day she was up at the First World Alliance, and she was staying with Sister Keffa and Bill Jones, and uh, she had left a copy there. And so they told me that she left her copy. So when I called her and said, I got your copy, she said, Ben, you can keep it. She said, why don't you just keep it? Gladly, because I think that uh, that sister has worked in obscurity for decades. And I'm
Mm.
glad to see that she is finally getting her flowers in certain places. Yeah,
This is
yeah,
the latest of Bingo book. We need to get this in
yeah.
English too.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Reconstruction
this
of
is really,
Du Nil Atlantique. Okay, right. Okay, cool, cool, cool. I'm,
so he
I'm gonna go.
changed his Negro Egyptian to
Mm.
Nilo Atlantic, the name
Okay.
of his language family. But
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah,
that's a
right.
big deal. Like there's so much scholarship in French by our French speaking Africans
Right.
that people really don't have a grasp of what's really out there, what I'm saying, unless they have access to that particular language, which is one of the reasons why unfortunately, I mean, I was alive technically when Sheikh Anta Diop was alive, but I was like 6, so
Mhm.
I'm just like far
Yeah,
in terms of when he died. I believe I was like 6 or 7, so like
right.
uh, I just wasn't at that level of consciousness where I would have known or appreciated a Sheikh Anta Diop.
But
But
the good thing is that with Obenga and the school of students behind him, and of course the work that they're doing at Sheikh Anta Diop University. For example, are you familiar with the Whitney Plantation down there in St. John the Baptist, Louisiana?
yes, and
Yeah,
the elder from Senegal
yeah,
who
yeah, yeah.
does a
Abraham
lot of
Asek.
scholarship.
Right,
Yes,
Ibrahim Aseki. I know him. I know him pretty well because my wife's folks are from Louisiana, and we go there pretty regularly. There's always something new to see and do there. And
yeah,
yeah, I've met several people, believe it or not, going around Louisiana who were from Senegal, who were students at Cheikh Anta Diop University, right?
yeah.
And they're always surprised when you know who he is. I'm like, yeah, man. Are you kidding?
Indeed.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
so
met
it's
him.
been a go ahead. No,
Well,
go
no, I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Sorry.
I met him a few years ago at the Check on the Diop conference.
Mm,
He did a presentation, so I actually got that video up on the channel. So if y'all
mm,
want to see him, his lecture I have on the channel. You just got to search it.
yeah.
But I'm sorry. Continue.
No, no, I'm saying that these are all, you say you'll be 47.
Correct.
Yeah. See, all this stuff, man, you're gonna reflect back on when you're 67. And you're gonna look back and say and look at all the stuff you've accumulated and the knowledge you
Yeah.
accumulate and the people that you met along the way and how these little droplets of wisdom and knowledge and understanding have helped you to grow. And the fact that somewhere along this line on this axis, and there's gonna be somebody else, and there are out there
Mm,
who gonna want to, like, you know you know how you do that, what you do, and we know the technology is moving, so we don't know where it will be, 5 till next week, in terms of how it's going. But at the same time, uh, you one of the ones out there on the grind, slaying dragons, bro, because that's what we need more and more dragon slayers, because the dragons, one thing I learned about the dragons is they be spitting fire, but they ain't got no burn on them at all. You know, none at all. They just threatening and looking all tough. But what we do, we have them back on their heels. And of course, one of the clever things they did was with the Heritage Foundation is that Kevin Roberts,
mm,
who at one of the times their leaders, they sent this white guy to school to study African American history from a
yeah.
from an undergraduate through a PhD. So when they said, okay, he said, okay, this is what I know, but we need to shut that down, because if people start knowing that, we're gonna be in
Hmm.
trouble. So we need to shut that down. We need to come up with whatever we want to call it. That they can't teach that no more in the classes, because now he know. And the thing that they did that we often don't do is that they play the long game. I learned that a long, long time ago. Like I said, back when I was in high school, they played the long game. They'll start plotting on you. They don't know anything, but they start studying. See, we don't study
Yeah.
them. We don't study them or how they study us. We don't study that so that we can know how to uh, engage in the battle intellectually when it comes. Um, um, you know, Machiavelli said in The Prince, you have to know the ways of the fox and the lion. You got to be a
Mhm.
fox to avoid the traps. You got to be a lion to scare away the wolves. You know,
Hmm.
and and there are many many ways that we have to be able to do. We got to be clever enough because we see the game. We see it. We've always seen it. You know, but are we strong enough now to be able to push back when it comes? You can't do that unless you got the kind of knowledge we got. Because as you know, when you get there in those rooms and you start spitting fire, they ain't got nothing. They have nothing but, well, I am who I am, and by virtue of who I say I am therefore the authority. And then when you start saying, oh yeah, well, what's your frame of reference? What's your frame of reference? You know, where you get that from? Oh, well, let me boom, 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 hit you with these references. See, and now, you know, you're being hit with these references, and now all of a sudden, now, you know, you got to step back and say that, you know, they're looking at you like, how you know this? You know, I think that's how them white men looked at me and my wife when we was out there at the Juneteenth thing, you know, because we was putting some fire on them, and it was just off the cuff. And
Yeah.
sometimes they like, you know what I mean? They like, no.
I want to just briefly, because you just reminded me again. I wanted to show this earlier.
Uh-huh.
This is one of the news things from Egypt from when we had the One Africa conference
Right.
uh, in as well. We were scheduled to have the One Africa conference. So this is one of the propagandas. So you see the flyer here. I forgot what
Yeah.
this gentleman's name is, but there was another program. This is another gentleman, Nashat El Dahi or El
Mm-hmm.
Dehi,
LD, uh-huh.
and so you can
Yeah,
see,
him.
in the
Him. Yeah,
newsroom.
he's the one we saw. That's him.
Um, and so when you go to the uh so they're slick, because they know that most people don't speak in Arabic. So what they do is they disable the translating
Right.
on the video. So I only got wind of this because of a brother, a Sudanese brother who I know who lived in Egypt. He sent it to me, and he speaks Arabic fluently and stuff. And so I'm just going through the comments, and I don't speak Arabic, so I had to use translating
Right.
software.
No,
So
this is
you
good.
can,
This is good. Yeah. Yeah, what he says here.
and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
says, I would like to report, or I would like a report sent to the Attorney General so that we can be assured of the effectiveness of this conference,
Mm-hmm.
because this organization, talking about Hoppy and the
Mm-hmm.
panel, represents a threat to the
Yeah.
Egyptian identity and North
Uh-huh.
Africa as a whole.
That's right.
Like that's the attitude that they have. And this
Mm-hmm.
one comment was like, there must be an alliance and a coordination between Egypt and North Africa to deter the bastards. And that's how I got it
Right,
translated.
right, right.
But um but just showing that to the extent that they'll ban, like
Yeah. Yeah, the
they
Dutch.
banned the Dutch archaeology team because they misunderstood the exhibit they had. So they were
Mm,
showing how hip hop adopted ancient Egyptian
right,
themes in their music and iconography and things,
right,
and
right.
they interpreted it as the Afrocentrics are
Mm-hmm.
coming through, misappropriating our identity and all this other kind of stuff, and
Right, right.
banned the whole archaeological team. And just
Yeah.
saying all that to say, to the extent in which they would go through to make sure that persons like you don't get a platform to share the deep information that you have, and why
Yeah.
we must be diligent and have our own platforms
Yes, sir.
and our own publications and things out there, so that you know you know um, I think in military terms. So
Mm.
like the first thing that any military will do is try to attack your communications,
Yes,
because if you can't communicate to your troops, then you
absolutely.
can't organize in a resistance, saying to the enemy or whatnot. So
That's right.
that's exactly what they do. So they're just doing classical war strategy. They're trying to cut off
Yeah,
communication, and we got to fight and have that communications idea. That's why we got to make sure your stuff gets published,
yeah,
because like, for example, like one of the things that I made it a staple to do is to try to meet and engage people whose work I read, if they're alive, right? Somehow, some way, I got to make it happen, right?
mm,
Because I remember, like, of course, I wasn't um conscious enough in the 90s to meet a Dr. Clark. I wasn't in the area because I was in Texas. And
I know
so
Texas is a
there's a lot of
whole
folks,
other type of vibe, man.
yeah, there's folks I didn't get to meet just because of location. But I got to speak to some and communicate, like with the late Dr. Fukiao,
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Kibandini Kia Bonseki Fukiao.
Mm-hmm.
But me and him used to engage, and he used to share stuff with me in the same way that Dr. Clark would share
Right.
stuff with you. But I never got to meet him.
Mm-hmm.
It was just distance and scheduling and all this other kind of stuff. And I was mad that I couldn't do that. So I tried. From that point on, it's like, no matter who it is, I got to meet them, and engage in their work. And I even have some of his unpublished works, that are in English, that have not been published, from like the 70s and early 80s. And I'm just saying, we can't let you go and you don't have these works published. So we got to figure out a way to make sure that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
information gets out there,
yeah,
so the future generations can have it.
yeah.
But
Great.
with that being said, I want to end the program. I don't want to take too much of your time, but we definitely have to get you back,
No
and
doubt.
probably on a specific subject, so that you
Mhm.
can kind of go in and give us details and hopefully a brief lesson, and expand. And so,
Oh, by the way,
are
you
there
can,
any closing? I'm
yeah,
sorry. Go
yeah.
ahead.
I think it's called ProQuest or something like that, where they have all the dissertations located.
Yes.
And you can go and look mine up. Like I said,
Hmm.
it's 400 pages of what when you jump into it, you'll be like, oh yeah, this is us. And they, I put so much on it that even my dissertation committee was like, oh, Joseph, I mean, when I was in defense, I'm all hyped up and stuff like that. They're like, oh, Joseph, you've been talking the same stuff ever since you walked in the door. We already know. We already know what you're gonna say. You know.
Indeed.
So yeah. Well, I will say in closing
All right.
that I've enjoyed this. I always do.
Mhm.
This is kind of putting me back in the classroom in a certain kind of way,
Uh,
and I will leave you with this. This is something I used to always, at the end of every semester and every class I taught, I would leave my students with this. And that's that what I teach you is not for today, it's for tomorrow. Because the things you don't understand today, you will understand tomorrow. Yep.
That's one of the reasons why I say buy the book when it comes out, even if you don't know the language or
Yeah.
anything. There'll come a time where it'll become relevant and you'll learn,
So,
but just get it now so you have
that's
it, so
right.
it plants a seed and you'll get it later.
That's right. It will
Um,
hit you one day like bam.
yeah.
But that's how wisdom is. That's how wisdom is.
Yeah.
Wisdom doesn't find you worthy until the time is right. So when
Mm,
wisdom finds you worthy, then wisdom will come to you. You won't have to look for wisdom. Wisdom will look for you. You'll be like in the bookstore, you know what I'm talking about? And
yeah.
you just not even aware, and bam, I was looking for that. All right. That's how it works. So yeah, brother, I appreciate it.
Quick story. It reminds me of Dr. Mubabingi Malolo. We invited him to the University of Houston way back in 2012, and he was giving us information on, right. So he did his dissertation in the 80s, like 85, 86. And if you look at his earlier work, it was more along traditional lines of Egyptology,
Right.
right? But in the late 90s, like 98 or 99, he had a stroke, and he had to sit down for a while. So he was in his basement doing some work, and he's this is how he's articulated. I'm not making this up, but um he's saying that a voice came to me and says, "You think that you're smart, huh?" And he's like, "You know, what do you mean?" He's like, "When you read the Egyptian reed leaf, what do you call that in your language?" And he said what he called it in his language, which is Chiluba. And he says, when you say me, my, how do you say that in your language? And they say it the exact same way. And so he continues about this conversation that he was having with himself. And this started, you can see a little bit of it in his earlier work, but like after that point in his works, you start to see him delve more from the perspective of his own culture and his own language. And it changed tremendously the direction of his scholarship and the experiments and stuff that he was doing with the language. And so that's when he concluded, you know, whether this is true, that is, you know, it's 85% Chiluba, but the vast majority of the words that you can find in Egyptian, you can find in these Bantu languages in Central Africa.
Check it out. Check it out. This is why, which I think Egyptologists miss, when Haku makes his journey and comes back. How is he communicating with these folks?
Exactly.
Right? How is he communicating with them? Because we know, as Dr. Clark has always said, that the Nile River is the first cultural highway, you know, on the continent of Africa. But we're talking about moving it all the way down into the Congo, and we know that language is never static. Language is dynamic. All right. Exactly. And so we might say a thing a particular way here in Chicago, but if I go to Houston, people are gonna know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, yeah, that's the same. That's what we mean when we say that like that down here. And so that's the beauty of Black creativity, African creativity, and especially when it comes to language, because can't nobody handle language like Black people can. You know, I mean, our stuff be so far away. White people trying to catch up with it. So you know, we calling it Ebonics. They calling it African American vernacular English, and we like, no. You know, and we got all these phrases. So every time they come up with, they pick up on a phrase, we got a whole new phrase that we talking in our community, right? and we're like, nobody's talking like that. But that's us. That's what we do. And it's one of the things I kind of admire about what I've read about in some of your work, is that the dynamism of African languages, even going into the Nile Valley. Because here's the thing we can all agree on: the Egyptologists ain't got it all together yet. They say so. They say we don't. Right. Well, we think is this group says that group says that, the other group say the other thing, you know what I mean? And I'll never forget you know, one of my professors at the ISAC telling me, he said, you can get 4 Egyptologists in a room together and ain't none of them gonna agree on nothing.
Yeah. I've had to come to that conclusion early on, that you have to kind of look at scholarship in terms of schools of thought.
Yeah.
and certain scholars belong to a particular school of thought,
Yep.
and you
Yep.
got
They
to
do.
understand that schools of thought, that the thought of that particular school to kind of understand that particular scholar's work in many
Right.
instances, and
Right.
that was accounts for the differences.
Yeah.
But like in matter of fact, in one of the okay, so Muba Bingi Balolo in 2008, he submitted an abstract to the International Conference of Egyptologists, and it was rejected. And it was on ancient Egyptian being a Bantu language. And so Dr. Bilolo, in his feelings, he writes an open letter to the organization, right? And it has a whole bunch of things, but this one section of it, he's like, he's talking about the education of the African, and how we are educated in the best of the African schools and in the best in the European schools. And we speak multiple languages, including European languages and the ancient languages. So he's talking about, he's like, who on the committee is more educated than a Theophilo Benga, than a Pierre Omendiji, right? Of a Bilolo, right? And there's a part of that where he says, because Muba being a Bilolo is also of a royal lineage in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so he's like, which one of y'all have ever witnessed a king's funeral? Right? He says, when y'all see the leopard skin, you taking it back to like some like some art form or something like that, like
Yeah.
you had mentioned earlier. He's talking about, when I look at the leopard skin, it is my double. It is the source of my power. It is my double on the other side. It is what empowers me and guides me and stuff like this. And so that
Well, you
inspired me
see how
to
the
look
brothers
deeper
came to
into that.
right. You see how the brothers came to from the Democratic Republic of the Congo to
Yes,
the people, right?
with the leopard cheetah skin.
I was like, that's tight. And check it out. We've got the priest in Kemet wearing the leopard skins in a place where ain't no leopards. Where them leopards come from? You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? They had to get
And
them from
and
someplace.
Chiluba has the exact same words for leopard, for priest, and for doubles and stuff like this.
Right,
Like,
right.
there's certain things that you can't, and that's why I go the linguistic route and not
Yes,
simply
sir.
the philological route, because the historical comparative linguistics is able to answer certain questions that you just can't get even just reading the text,
Yes.
right? Because as you got to understand that lineage of thought and where it's present in the other cultures, and to see how they use it, and to see what's the common thread between the expressions in these particular cultures around Africa. And you be surprised. Like, I'm working on a text right now showing how, because I always wonder, like, why the determinative or the classifier for female goddesses, why do they have a snake? What's the reason behind the snake used to depict the feminine,
Yes, right. Come on with it. Come
versus
on
blah
with
blah.
it, brother. Yeah, come on
And
with it.
so the linguistics tells us, because there's a phenomenon called paronymy, and the ancients tried to synthesize anything that had commonalities, and especially in language. So uh, I think in the Egyptological literature they'll call it like punning or something like that, in terms of the homonymy between words. But the reason why that is the way that it is because the same word, well, the same pronunciation for the words for snake was the same pronunciation for the words for mother and
Yes.
nurse and things of this nature. And so you see this connection, and why, like, you'll see the Wadjet, and Renanette breastfeeding, saying the young, and especially when you think about snakes don't breastfeed, they don't have milk, they lay eggs. Why is this phenomenon? But it's only via the African languages that any of
Exactly.
this stuff makes sense, and
Yeah.
you see it in the cultures, and I'm showing how even though they don't have the graphical symbols,
Mm.
the expression, the living culture where you see that happening today is in Nigeria with the Iyami,
Yeah.
the Iyami Aje to be
Mhm.
exact, and those are the mothers who empower and consecrate the kings, and you'll see the same kind of thing, and they're using the same words. So when I say the Iya and the Iyami and the Aje,
Yeah.
these
Mhm.
are the same words linguistically as what we would pronounce as Wajid
Mhm.
and other things, and there's a
Right.
way that
Right.
you can show this and demonstrate this, but
Right.
that
Right. Right.
it's the
That's
language, the linguistics that it helps you to understand and make, oh, it's been in our face this whole time,
yeah.
and but the others, they will never have access because they don't have the culture. Like
That's
they
it.
may have the finances for the digs, but they don't have the culture
Mhm.
that allows for them to interpret what they're digging up out of the ground.
All right. Let me tell you a funny story related to that.
Go ahead.
Now, of course, I taught philosophy for 18 years, and I don't have a degree in philosophy. All right, but I've read well all of them. And so, and I represent like, 1%, 1/10 or 1% of all the people who teach philosophy in the United States being a black man. All right. Now, of course, you got black folks who are philosophy teachers who are all caught up in the Western, whether, as, the analytical or speculative or whatever forms that all that means nothing to me. And I never forget um, that I got my my class got reviewed by the chair, and I taught this lesson on what they call it. There's a name for it, but the bottom line is the question of if God is so good, why is there so much evil in the world? And so I went into um, showing text in ancient Egyptian, Hebrew, Arabic, and Greek, and I put all the scripts on the board with translations, and went through the whole analysis of them and all of that and what the problems were and stuff. Europeans with their fundamental alienation, their whole mind versus matter thing. That Rousseau talked about all that kind of stuff, and how these things were viewed in ancient Kemet, and even how they looked at in the Bible, uh, and how the Greeks who have Greek thought is very influential in the New Testament because it was written with people with Greek thought in mind. And so when it was done, and he sat down with me to talk about it, he said, "That's the most arrogant shit I ever seen in my life." This is what he says to me, and I'm like, "Why you feel like that?" He said, "To put all that stuff up there on the board and say all that. I mean, that's not kind of what we doing." And I was like, "Look, man, I'm gonna call his name. Is that because your philosophy education did not allow y'all to study Greek, the Greek language, to read the text in Greek and stuff like that?" He said, "Well, no." I said, "So I'm supposed to not do that because you don't like the fact that that's not what you did, but I do it. I know it. You see that, right?" I said, in fact, he saw me that so happened the day he was there. One of my Arabic speaking students, and I had lots of them because they really enjoyed taking my classes because of what I knew about their culture. We got into this whole discussion in Arabic about a particular concept. And I told him, I said, I got these Arabic speaking students. They into Kalam, which is Arabic kind of philosophy and stuff, and they enjoy engaging in these types of discussions. And and it dawned on me and said, these people, they suffer from serious cognitive dissonance. I mean, it's just hard for them to gather that a person like myself or like you, that we know all these different languages and can do, interpret certain type of analysis in it, and they can't because that's not what we're supposed to be able to do. Even though, as you clearly pointed out, Asa, You can travel on the continent and you can meet brothers who speak 12 different languages, including the European languages, easily. But they're not there. My Arabic teacher told me this, and I hadn't known it before she said it, but she's absolutely right. That there are more Africans. She said it like this: there are more black people who speak Arabic than there are Arabs who speak Arabic. And she's right. Right. And I'm always amazed that and we just happened just recently, I think maybe Friday or Saturday. No, this is Sunday, so it must have happened Thursday or Friday. That my wife and I were downtown, and they have this African museum inside of one of the great big malls here in Chicago downtown. And I thought it was interesting because I passed by and I saw the African art. I wanted to go in. They had a museum. Guess who's running the museum? Somebody from Lebanon. And you travel on the continent of Africa, West Africa, you got all your booths and stuff like that, and in the market and stuff like that. But in the back, you might have Lebanese or Jordanians or whatever, running stuff back there. And so I engaged him in some Arabic and stuff like that. But in my mind, I'm saying, see, this is what y'all do. Y'all deny us Africa, but while y'all stealing it right from under our feet. And then because y'all are merchants, y'all would take our stuff and sell it out there. Not a black person working in this store, but y'all sell our stuff because that's what y'all do. And again, going back to Egypt, they know that we know that until prior to 639, them people wasn't there. And how they came in. And then when the Turks came in, right, Turks were there for 400 years, man. What they did to that whole part of what they call North Africa, is evident in the looks of the people and who's in power and stuff like that, even though they might have all these, Arabic names and stuff like that. That's immaterial because they're the ones who really were in power because they were the conquerors, and the colonizers of that whole part where the Turks had a major influence on what goes on there. So you might have people with these different type of Arabic names, but they're Turks. Turks are there, especially the ruling class. Even in Egypt, and most of what they think of as North Africa, they're all descendants of Turks. And this is why certain other people can't get in because them Turks got a lock on stuff like that. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, but this has been beautiful, brother. I enjoyed chopping it up with you here. We got to do this again. Absolutely.
Indeed. Well, again, I appreciate you coming through and sharing your wisdom. I look forward to seeing you. I'll more than likely be live streaming it on at the end of July. And it's from the
24th to the
26th?
Yeah, 24th to the 26th.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so again, make sure that you visit the website that is hoppyfilm.com and to purchase tickets for the in-person as well as the online if you are unable to attend the event in Chicago. It is 3 days of activities, so I'm assuming it's 2 days of the actual lectures, but I think there's some kind of tour, something like that, prior to everything going down. So make sure that y'all check that out. And we'll be interviewing some more of the speakers who will be presenting at the conference in the upcoming weeks. So stay tuned for that. I do appreciate each and every one of you. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you are new to the channel, and make sure that you like the video and share it with all friends and colleagues. And a new feature, matter of fact, some of our t-shirt designs or whatnot are available and is now automatic on the channel. So you'll see like rows of them at the bottom. So if you want to support the channel by purchasing one of the designs that we have, I'm just showing two right now. So you know about the concept of kimoyo, which is the term that we use to replace African spirituality, using a Kikongo word, kimoyo, and there's a whole bunch of other designs and the like. And so make sure that you check that out. So until next time, y'all be easy. Make sure you leave a comment, and we'll be back soon. Hotep.
Hotep.